8 ways AI recruitment software cuts your time to fill. Now, what we know is that time to fill isn't one number. It's 8 metrics of them stacked up end to end. And most agency owners never actually separate them. Right? If we break this down, it's things like your intake, sourcing, screening, write-up, the presentation you send over, the client review, the interview scheduling, and then finally the offer. 8 stages. And when an owner says our time to fill is 30 to 40 days, what they've actually done is just add those 8 numbers together and losing all the information and context that goes behind it. Because that's what happens when you pull them apart. AI can meaningfully compress 5 of those 8. And the 3 that it can't touch are for most agencies where the majority of their calendar days are actually sitting. So in this video, let's tear down those 8 stages one at a time. What AI recruitment software does to each with real numbers. And I'm going to be specific about 3 where the honest answer is not that much. Because if you buy software expecting to fix those, you're going to be disappointed and you're going to blame the wrong thing. Here's the frame for the whole video in 8 stages. Intake, sourcing, screening, write-up, submittal assembly, candidate review, interview coordination, offer, and close. We're also going to color code these as we go along. Green means AI compresses this meaningfully. Amber means partially. And red just means that it barely moves. So stage 1, the intake. Big green check mark here. The intake call is where most searches quietly go wrong though. A consultant takes 45 minutes briefing, writes half a page of notes, starts sourcing against an incomplete spec. 2 weeks later, a candidate gets rejected for requirements that were mentioned in a 30-minute meeting and never written down. Every day of sourcing against the wrong brief is a day added to your time to fill or even your time to submit if we think about what's truly in our control. This is the highest leverage stage in the entire process, and almost nobody treats it that way. Full capture of the intake call fixes it structurally. Not a summary, but the actual transcript, searchable in the ATS, attached to the job, where your researcher asks, did they say anything about the visa sponsorship? That's a 5-second lookup instead of a guess. One of our users, Tiffany, who's a president of the firm, specifically called out that they record intake and business development calls, not just candidate ones. That's a mature use of this exact kind of tool. Days saved, variable, potentially enormous, right? A brief misunderstood at intake can add 2 weeks. Renting that even just once a quarter easily pays for the software itself. Stage 2 is sourcing, and I would give this one a red. Because the direct answer, AI note-taking and workflow automation essentially does nothing to your sourcing speed. Stage 2 is sourcing, and I'd give this one an amber because the direct answer is it honestly depends. Right? An AI note taker and workflow automation does essentially nothing to your sourcing speed if the data that it's collecting never ends up inside of your source of truth. Right? If it's just living in another system that you are still trying to get information from while going through external sources, it's not helpful at all to what you're trying to do as a firm. Sourcing speed is a function of your database quality, your outreach volume, and your response rates. Those are different tools and different problems. There is one indirect effect, but it can be a slow burn, right? If every conversation you've ever had is actually properly captured inside of your source of truth, then have we spoken to this person before actually becomes answerable, right? Paige, who's one of the office admins with our customer base, describes her team being weeks behind on entering interview notes, sometimes even months, right? Candidates who have been interviews and were effectively invisible to the rest of their team. That's a redundant sourcing task. you're resourcing people who you've already had conversations with, and that can compound over weeks, months, and even years. So my answer to this, Amber, I would really take a deeper dive into what is structurally broken potentially in your sourcing process before just trying to automate this with AI. Outbound sourcing is 100% relevant, but that should only be factored in if you're not able to successfully find people from contacts you've already had or from referrals that you're getting from those people, which are our highest leverage and highest ROI inputs that we can have. Stage 3 is screening, and I'd also give this one an Amber. Right? The screening call, that just takes as long as it takes. 45 minutes is 45 minutes, and you honestly shouldn't want that to be shorter. What changes is the 15 to 20 minutes after that call. Right? Brian, who's a managing partner, quantified this precisely. What used to take him 15 to 20 minutes per interview is now automated. Mary Stewart, who's one of the operations managers that we work with, described a call generating all the necessary information within seconds. Work that would normally have taken them 15 to even 45 minutes, depending on the client they're working with. Run the math on that. A recruiter doing 8 screens a day at 15 minutes of post-call admin, each is 2 hours of their day spent, not screening, but just physically typing up that screening note. Days saved, maybe not directly, but it returns a quarter of a recruiter's day, which shows up as capacity in stages 1 to 3 that we spoke about earlier. Now, stage number 4 is a big green light here, and this typically is the single biggest win that a firm can have. This is the one with the hardest numbers behind it. Our survey before co-recruit, most respondents were spending 20 to 30 minutes plus preparing a single candidate presentation. After, it consistently dropped to 10 minutes or less. That's about a 75% reduction in the time it takes you to create these deliverables. And when we asked which single KPI improved the most throughout our whole product experience, about 60% chose candidate presentation speed. Not just data accuracy, which came in second at around 20%, not cost per hire, submittal speed. If you line up these individual numbers, right, like Brian, 30 to 45 minutes per presentation gone. Joanna, another owner, 30 minutes per presentation saved, plus another 10 on the candidate briefs. And many others who have mentioned that their presentation time, the amount of time it took for them to even just put that information in their ATS, 2 incredibly manual tasks coming off their plates entirely. So if we break this down from a days save side of things, this could be 1 to 3 days per search. And in a contingent race, that is frequently the whole margin between you and the firm that got there first. Stage number 5 is that presentation and ATS entry. And this is another big green checkbox here. Related, but distinct. And we're separating, I think, because the failure mode is different. Write-up is creating the document, right? This stage is moving it. Making sure it's back into your ATS or from that ATS to your client's inbox and then into the system that you're using to track it. This is where the copy and paste task really lives. And also where data hygiene quietly dies. Heather, who's a managing partner and a CEO, was very specific with this. 1 to 2 hours daily on note-taking and admin tasks. She names importing those notes into Bullhorn as her example. Owen describes the mechanism, recording the call, full transcript syncs to the ATS, notes written with that custom template, all inside within 3 minutes of hanging up the call. 3 minutes. Not at the end of the day, not on Friday after you've chased them down for the entire week, before the recruiter has even finished their next coffee. The compound effects matter more than the minutes. 60% of our survey respondents named the automatic ATS updates as the key feature, second only to the note-taking itself, after about 95% of them. When the ATS is current, the next person to touch the record isn't starting cold. And if you think about this from, again, that days saved perspective, that's easily half a day to a whole day in search, plus eliminating that Friday afternoon catch-up, which I know we'd all love to get back. Stage number 6 is that client review. And this one's a big red X. And this is the important one. Here's where I need to be straight with you. Client review, for most agencies, is the single biggest blocker of calendars in the entire process we have. And an AI recruitment software does approximately nothing to help save that. Our survey data says this out loud. Only 20% of users reported time to fill decreasing. 45% said there's no change or they weren't sure. And 35% said they're unsure specifically. One respondent explained in a sentence, faster time to submit, but you can't always help based on the client's availability, right? So we can help you get there faster, but it's really up to that client and the relationship that you two are driving to make sure we're taking that final leap. You can't automate your client's hiring manager, right? If they take 9 days to review the shortlist that you sent over, that you shaved 6 hours off of creating those presentations for, this changes your total time by about 3%. There's one second order effect worth naming though. If your presentation arrives faster and reads better, right? It's structured, it's evidence-based, it's answering the questions a client would have just emailed you, you face fewer clarification loops. Right, Brigitte, who's one of the consulting directors we work with, described admin cut by more than half, especially and specifically credited it with getting her shortlist to her client sooner. Sooner, note, not reviewed sooner, but sent sooner, which is really what we can control. The other part really comes down to how are we setting expectations with that client early on through that business development or that intake process on when they should be getting us that feedback faster. So again, if we break this down to a day saved, it can be nearly zero directly because this is a client management problem and that's not easily solved by software, right? That's down to the relationship and the expectations that you and that client have set. Stage number 7 is that interview coordination. I give this one an amber one because scheduling is a calendar problem and there are dedicated tools to help with it. Where the stack helps is the debrief loop. After every interview round, somebody has to capture what the client thought, what the candidate thought, and help recalibrate. Traditionally, that's 2 calls plus 2 write-ups plus an email. And I know Joanna specifically called out 10 minutes saved on candidate briefs, small per instance, but if you multiply that across candidates in multiple rounds through live searches, that could be time saving of half a day to a day per search. And that final one is the final stage of offer to close. And I would still put this one as an amber, but here with high stakes. Because the offer stage is where searches go to die. And they usually die on something that was said weeks earlier, but unfortunately forgotten. The candidate mentioned in screening that their bonus vested in March, for example. Nobody wrote that down. You structure an offer that ignores that. They counter offer, you scramble, you lose 2 weeks or maybe even that placement. The value here isn't speed. It's not losing the search. Every compensation signal, every hesitation, every I need to think about relocation, all of it's relevant, verbatim, and from a call in 2 weeks. If we think about this from a time saved perspective, there's none directly. But placements protected is real, but obviously unquantifiable. And I'm just not going to invent a number for this one. So in total, let's total it up honestly. 5 green lights, a few amber stages compressed, 2 are red lights or near red. And on a typical search, we're covering somewhere from 2 to 5 calendar days of interval time, plus roughly 4 to 5 hours per recruiter per week of capacity. That's 73% of our users saving 4 hours plus, with 19% saving 10 hours or more. per week per consultant. But if the client reviewing is eating 15 days of your 30-day cycle, your headline time to fill number is barely going to move. And that's not where the software is failing. That's you finding out where your days actually were. So the diagnostic before you buy anything: take the last 10 completed searches, split every one into these 8 stages, and add up internal delays versus the client wait. If internal is the majority, the case for this software is straightforward, and the numbers in this video are yours to capture. If client wait is the majority of your delays, let's fix that first, right? That comes down to the service level agreement at intake or maybe even in business development, scheduled review windows, shortlist captured at 3, then we can start to automate it. So if you want to run a diagnostic against your entire process with real world workflows rather than just a spreadsheet, do that in a 7-day trial with a 45-minute setup, and no, you don't need a technical person for it. Links down below, and if you found the 8-stage breakdown useful on its own, take it and use it. It works whether you buy anything or not.